Disneyland is an incredibly frightening amusement park. In the past, some individuals have unintentionally lost their lives due to the attractions in this place. Disney employees are always obligated to adhere to some perplexing rules. Do you happen to know what those rules are? Disneyland is one of the most beloved amusement parks for children, but it comes with its share of frightening stories. Today, let's explore 4 terrifying tales related to this amusement park with the MG Horror Studio. The death case of the female employee Deborah around 1974 to 1988. At Disneyland in Anaheim, California, there was an extremely popular attraction called America Sings. Essentially, it was a musical performance featuring animatronic animals, led by an eagle named Sam and an unnamed owl. There were a total of 6 acts arranged throughout the program, with the animatronic animals taking turns appearing and singing different songs. However, what particularly fascinated America Sings visitors was its unique stage mechanism. When attending the show, the audience would be seated in curved rows facing the circular stage. This stage rotated, divided into 6 smaller stages separated by sturdy walls. Beneath it was a counterclockwise rotating motor, allowing the stages to appear alternately every 4 minutes. During the stage transitions, curtains would be drawn, and all lights in the building turned off, creating complete darkness. Attention would be solely on the performances and catchy melodies on the stage. This was considered a significant advancement and a money-making venture for Disneyland, but an incident occurred just 9 days after America Sings opened its doors. On July 8, 1974, the performances at America Sings proceeded as usual until around 10:37 p.m. when the lights went out, the machinery shifted, and the stage changed. Suddenly, amid the music, a chilling scream echoed. Initially, people thought it was part of the show and paid no attention. However, some individuals near the stage felt something unusual, so after the performance, they requested staff to investigate. Their intuition was correct. Young employee Deborah Gail Stone had tragically lost her life between the moving stage and a stationary curved wall. Upon investigation, it was revealed that as the stage rotated, Deborah accidentally fell, getting wedged between the moving stage's wall and the stationary curved guide wall, leading to her fatal entrapment. Deborah's parents subsequently filed a lawsuit against Disneyland, which was settled. America Sings was temporarily closed for repairs and reopened 3 days later. However, it eventually closed permanently as it no longer fit into Disney's future plans. America Sings became a storage area for a long period before being renovated into the Tomorrowland Exhibition Center in 2015. Despite the passage of time, the mention of America Sings brings back memories of the tragic accident that young Deborah had to endure in this place. Please refrain from talking while in line before diving into the story. Let me tell you something. I absolutely love Disneyland. I've always loved this place. From the Haunted Mansion and the Pirates of the Caribbean area to the Space Mountain roller coaster. You might say I'm silly, but I love all those places. As long as they remain in memory, I will always feel strangely excited whenever I talk about it. The scent of roller coaster axle grease mixing with the sweet aroma of popcorn stands when stepping onto Main Street for the first time. The first glimpse of the Sleeping Beauty castle shining brightly under the Southern California sun. The great dilemma of choosing between the high-speed Matterhorn ride or Mr. Toad's Wild Path. All of this accompanied by one warning: the crowds. But who cares when standing in front of the fantastic adventures about to unfold? We all come to Disneyland for the same reason. Well, maybe not everyone. My emotions for the happiest place on earth are something I want to share with my children one day. And yes, the most important thing I have now is my 10-year-old son, a little guy who has just discovered the concept of magic. I must admit that at his age, I didn't know much about it. Last week, I saw the excitement on the little guy's face as we parked at the station and took the train to Disneyland for our annual summer trip. Late August is back-to-school season, so the visitors here are relatively sparse. My son has been homeschooled since the 4th grade, so we have more time for our journey, and this trip to Disneyland marks the end of the summer break and the beginning of his school year. Of course, everyone in my family has their favorite spots. My wife and I love the haunted house. Surprisingly, our son prefers the lush jungle exploration area. Looking back, it's an ideal place to encounter those people while waiting in line for the spine-chilling survival journey to begin. A boat trip full of instability, where you'll be attacked by all kinds of wild animals because, well, they are wild animals. They are a family of 5 who seem normal and extremely friendly. The first one to strike up a conversation was a boy about my son's age. At first, I didn't pay much attention to their chat, but soon after, all of us were drawn into a conversation about our favorite places worldwide. And, of course, they knew a lot about this place. Like when the cars were manufactured and the oral traditions about them. And then, when I heard Walter, the father, call his daughter Ariel, I knew immediately they were die-hard Disney fans. Walter and Belle had been together for over 20 years, along with their 3 children Ariel, Donald, Dawn, and Woody, forming the most Disneyland-loving family you could ever meet. Everything about them was labeled with Disney in various ways. From Mickey Mouse-themed t-shirts and high-end Disney pin-covered lanyards to Ariel's pink Minnie Mouse sneakers. Even their eldest son, Woody, expressed his fondness for the magical realm of Walt Disney. The family spoke of this place as if it were their home. They even addressed some employees by their first names, amusingly, as the staff certainly didn't react or even recognize them, responding with confused looks. We should have noticed that first or discovered that their names were all based on Disney characters. But no, quite the opposite. After that trip, we could say that we had become Disney's friends. We explored several attractions together, which was fantastic, especially for my son. Homeschooling makes it a bit challenging for him to make friends, and seeing him connect with Ariel and Donald made me very pleased. Both Walter and Belle were friendly and knowledgeable about Disneyana. But Woody, he wasn't very approachable. That kid just stood there, silent and observant. Anyway, he was a teenager, so I didn't pay much attention. After the adventure in Peter Pan's land, we looked for a place to rest and have some Coke. Both families sat under the shade, taking a break while waiting for the kids to finish their Coca-Cola cans. It was at this moment that Walter's Disneyland story started to become peculiar. In fact, I'm a lifelong member of Club 33, Walter exclaimed unexpectedly with extreme enthusiasm. For those who don't know, Club 33 is an exclusive private VIP club located in New Orleans Square, a place almost impossible to access. It was hard to believe he was a lifelong member there. My instincts told me it was too far-fetched. However, when he promised to take us there for lunch, all doubts vanished. I thought, perhaps he was telling the truth. "Let's play a few more games, and then we'll head there," he said. I gracefully suggested that we should go separately as politely as possible, but he insisted that we join them. I could sense my wife's gaze, urging me to stand up and put an end to this connection immediately. However, the chance to visit Club 33 only comes once in a lifetime. As we all stood up to leave, I saw Walter pick up my son's empty soda cup. He took the Mickey Mouse-shaped lid and the straw, disposing of the rest in the trash bin. He handed them to Belle, who placed them in her side pouch. Walter looked at me, smiling with a knowing gleam in his bright white teeth. He said, "Everything is a memory. We should have left them behind at that moment, but we didn't." Instead, the kids started deciding on the next destination, and both my wife and I were passive, so we remained silent, waiting for them to decide. My son opened the park map and got a deep cut on his thumb from a piece of paper. I hadn't noticed it until we were all waiting in line at the Haunted Mansion. I overheard Ariel telling my son to suck on the cut to stop the bleeding. I handed him a napkin to cover the wound, but she insisted that he should suck on it. She persisted remarkably. Soon after, in the eerie, stretching room elevator, as I saw Ariel sucking on my son's thumb, my concern turned into horror. I was in shock at what I witnessed, and so was my son. The girl was sucking blood from his cut. Fatherly instinct prompted me to pull my son's hand away from that troubled girl's mouth. She looked at both of us with innocent eyes like a porcelain doll, silent and calm. I glanced around to see if my wife noticed, but Walter was talking to her, or more accurately, talking to everyone. "This place is the last one. Mr. Disney personally worked on it before he died," he boasted, oblivious to the discomfort of the people in line. I tried to walk alongside my family so that we could board the ride together in the chaos, but in the end, I found my wife sitting next to Belle, while I was stuck with Walter. After ensuring that my son was seated with me, I noticed Ariel and Donald sharing a ride, while Woody rode alone. Throughout my favorite journey, Walter continued to elaborate on the details of the scenes we passed. He explained how the animatronics worked and the techniques used to create 3D images. I learned more than I wanted or needed, having to sit there and listen to him ramble, ruining my favorite and most cherished trip. But what worried me more was the blood-sucking girl sitting in the back seat, next to my wife. Only God knows what happened afterward. We were all trapped. All I wanted to do was get my entire family away from them. Finally, as the trip ended, the narrator's warning, "Beware of hitchhiking ghosts," suddenly took on an entirely new meaning. I hurriedly pulled my family away and asked the first staff member I saw about the location of the first aid station. Who knows what illness that family might have? That little girl had just sucked on my son's cut. Walter tried to lead us to Club 33, but I held my family's hand, steering us away from the crowd and toward Disneyland's Main Street. "Just keep going, don't look back." My wife understood and followed suit. We walked briskly, as if praying those odd folks were not behind us. When we reached Main Street, I finally turned around and saw nothing. We had successfully shaken them off. I anxiously applied a heap of first aid ointment to my son's thumb and recounted to my wife what I had witnessed. "You wouldn't believe what I saw either," she said, while I wrapped a Disney-themed adhesive bandage around our son's finger, now covered in ointment. But now wasn't the time for discussion. We needed to make a decision. In the end, instead of leaving the park together, we decided to go to the childcare area in California Adventure. We had to pay to enter the park, and it wasn't cheap at all. Why let those weirdos ruin the last day of our summer vacation? Damn it, we were also very hungry. At California Adventure, we sat in the farthest corner we could find in the eatery and began to unwind as our food digested. I told my wife about that poor kid who had his injured finger sucked, and she shared with me what she had seen. It was extremely unsettling. While at the haunted house, she briefly peered into Belle's hip pouch and saw a few things wrapped inside the plastic bag. "What were those things?" I asked. "Used tissues, hair strands that looked like they were pulled from a comb, flattened Disney soda cups, leftovers from someone else in the park, a few items resembling dried sanitary napkins and used blood-soaked bandages. On that pile of belongings was our son's Mickey Mouse-themed soda lid and straw combo that Walter had taken earlier." We sat there, stunned, paralyzed to the point of almost being unable to move. The only thought in my head at this moment was, "What the? Look! It's Woody." My son stood up, pointing at him. I turned around to see his tall, slender figure gliding through the crowd. He was alone. I silently pressed my son back into his seat and tried to appear calm. My wife and I exchanged glances. We knew it was time to leave, but as we were about to stand up, they suddenly walked into the eatery. "Where are you guys going?" Walter stepped forward with a grin, showcasing his gleaming white teeth. They sat down, blocking our path. I glanced at Woody, who was sitting alone a few tables away, grinning widely like a madman. He had been watching us. "So, where should we go next?" Walter's voice slightly changed, as if he knew we were observing them. "I think we should go home." He didn't believe my wife's lie. "Home? It's only 2 hours." We sat there, again trapped with their family. Then, a sudden idea struck me. I used all my politeness to suggest the next destination, Mickey's Fun Wheel. Their kids cheered with joy. My wife looked at me as if I had 5 eyes. I just went along and tried to appear excited. "We can all sit in the same Ferris wheel cabin," Walter said cheerfully. While waiting in line, my wife squeezed my hand so tightly that I thought my hand was about to break. But I had a plan, and it was about to be executed as we got closer to the Ferris wheel. The most crucial thing at this moment was to keep that bizarre family in front of us. Every time I saw my son getting too close ahead, I discreetly pulled him back, ensuring that we stayed together. And it worked, except for Woody, who always stood behind us. Ahead of us, there were only 3 groups. My heart felt like it was stuck in my throat. If this plan failed, I didn't know what we should do next. I had to execute everything perfectly. The big gamble was how many people a Ferris wheel cabin could hold, and 8 people were perfect. As it was our turn to board, I tried to position my family in what was considered the best spot. The eccentric family was standing in front of us, so they would board the Ferris wheel first, including that wretched Woody. As the Ferris wheel moved, and our cabin approached, I suddenly grabbed my wife and son. The fun was about to begin. Once everything was in place, I pulled my wife and son to the side and stepped back. We quickly squeezed through the confused faces of other passengers to exit. I looked back at the brightly lit Ferris wheel beginning its operation, seeing that peculiar group trapped in their cabin. My plan had succeeded. I glanced into Walter's eyes one last time before they vanished into the deep black. Only a dark void remained. We wasted no time getting out of there, not even bothering to wait for the tram, rushing to the parking lot. As we got in the car, I sighed with relief. "What are you doing? Why don't you start this darn car?" My wife still didn't seem quite relieved. She maintained that state until we were completely away from there. I started the car, drove out, and looked at my son sitting in the back seat through the rearview mirror. A sense of anger surged within me. This had been a terrible day for the boy. I noticed his first aid bandage was missing. "You must have lost it somewhere," the boy said. Perfect timing, I thought. We drove home in silence. It had been almost a week since our fateful trip to the happiest place on earth. We had a few discussions about not letting those strange things interfere with our happy times, no matter where we were. We shouldn't let those bizarre experiences ruin our future trips. I mean, what could be worse than that? I had truly been optimistic about everything until I picked up the mail yesterday. There was a simple envelope, without a stamp, mixed in with the mail delivered during the week. I opened it, and inside was my son's personal bandage, along with a small note on the card that read, "It's a small world after all." It was written, "Everything is a memory, your friend, Walt." Tragedy in the Mickey Mouse Town. Disney World's animation town was my first job after high school, and everything was great, at least initially. For those who don't remember, the animation town is where Mickey and Minnie live in the park, with everything you'd expect from a real neighborhood, where cartoon characters live. There are houses, kitchens, bedrooms. Kids can even go in and try turning the small cartoon microwave. Donald Duck owns a small boat-shaped house you can tour. Goofy has a high-speed roller coaster. There are so many fascinating things here. So, even though it's considered for kids, I still liked it. I mean, where else in the world can you step into a real cartoon town? That's all until I started working the night shift there. Things that seemed cute and silly during the day quickly became terrifying when the sun set, and the visitors left the park. Being a security guard, I became one of the last people in the park at night, unfortunately often alone. One night, while wandering around picking up trash, I circled through the animation town to get to Tomorrowland and back to the park's gate. I finished my shift at 10 in the evening and made sure everything was okay, so I was walking quite fast by then. Usually, all the houses would turn off lights and sound effects at night. But tonight, as I returned there, all the lights and effects were still on full blast. I was stunned. This was entirely different from usual. I was about to call someone to report this, and people would surely get into big trouble. As I was walking and taking out my walkie-talkie to make the call, everything suddenly went silent. Then, I heard footsteps in the distance, and when I turned to look back, I thought I saw a tail disappearing into the bushes near the train station. I assumed it might be a raccoon or something since there's a national forest behind the park, and animals appearing here isn't uncommon. So, I almost dismissed it and continued my journey. The next morning, during my shift, I heard some terrifying news about the animation town. They found a mouse gutted and smeared all over Minnie's floor. It was concluded to be killed by 1 or 2 possums, but I still felt quite suspicious about that. Anyway, everything continued as usual. Until early evening, I saw a group of police and security personnel gathering around Main Street planning something. When such a group gathered, something must have happened. I saw one of my superiors standing on the sidewalk, staring at them, so I went to ask her what had happened. She said she wasn't sure, but she had heard something about a missing child. Until now, I had never encountered anything like that, so I became extremely worried. When I finished cleaning everything, it was around 2 a.m. I had to do all my usual tasks, but I was afraid to go to the animation town. I still felt dizzy from what happened last night, even though I knew there was nothing to be afraid of. So, when I got to that area, I felt extremely relieved when the lights and sound effects were not working. I approached the trash can in front of Minnie's house and saw the cartoon refrigerator still open through the window frame. I thought maybe one of the interns forgot to close it when they closed the park at night. So, I walked in, entered the kitchen, but it couldn't be fully closed. Suddenly, a sense of horror spread throughout my body. I knew something was wrong. Then, I slowly opened the refrigerator door and found a lifeless and chilling child inside. In panic, I called my manager and told him what had happened. He instructed me to leave the house immediately, and the police were on their way. Right after that, I heard the sound of some objects falling in one of the rooms behind me, and someone ran out the door. I was so scared that I could hardly move, just stood frozen in place and saw a humanoid figure with a tail pass by the window. I immediately rushed out of the house to see what it was, but it had disappeared. A moment later, the police arrived, and after looking around for a few minutes, they took me in for questioning. When we went outside, I saw something standing in front of the children's roller coaster. I could hardly recognize what it was because it stood in the shadows, but it seemed to have a long, horrifyingly protruding mouth, like a person trying to surgically alter their face to resemble a cartoon character. I screamed for the police to turn around, but when they looked, it was gone. Perhaps it had escaped into the woods behind the roller coaster. After my story, the police had the park and the forest area thoroughly checked but found nothing. Since only I had seen that strange cartoonish man, they didn't take it very seriously. The tragic death of the child was determined to be due to suffocation, and the basic negligence was attributed to the child's parents. They claimed that the parents had not paid attention, and perhaps the child had climbed into the refrigerator on their own. Regardless of what they said, I always knew what really happened to that child, and whenever I passed by that area, I would always keep an eye out for the bizarre cartoon man. The bizarre plush toys at the Disney warehouse about 2 months ago. I got a job at one of Disney's warehouses. As of now, everything is fine. My team mainly handles shipping packages, putting everything you ordered into boxes before handing them off to delivery personnel. My team has a peculiar tradition. It's like a joke that our manager is so inept that instead of reporting to her, we have to report to the stuffed toys in the break room, including the trio of gentlemen, Donald, Jose, and Panchito. Each one is about 50 centimeters tall, has its own cardboard desk, and everything. We talk to them as if they are real people and even invite them to our annual Christmas party. We also receive feedback or reports from them. Donald usually points out the violations I've committed, and I get a fair share from Panchito, but all in Spanish. Something about the salsa I bought not meeting standards from the store. I think my Spanish is quite bad, and once, Jose asked me to play some samba music in the break room. By the way, I've also composed some heavy metal songs for Disney. If you don't believe it, you can find them on YouTube or Spotify. Most of us know that the ones sending those are not actually dolls, just our little prank. Seriously, I thought I was being disliked as the newcomer when I received a report about my first day. But people still continue to do it. Anyway, about 2 weeks ago, an incident occurred when a higher-up manager from the parent company in the US came to check the warehouse. It was mainly related to taxes, but when they came to the break room and asked about the 3 gentlemen, I was the one who stepped forward to explain the little joke, even showing him all the messages I received from them. "How adorable," he remarked. "But as far as I remember, we've never made or sold 2 stuffed animals, Jose and Panchito. Maybe they're knockoffs," I suggested. "Or someone working here made them." "No, they're definitely products from our factory," he explained. Both of us were puzzled for a moment, until my manager walked in and started complaining about the teddy bears. It seems the mastermind behind this prank had gone too far when ordering new supplies and signing sick leave as well as salary slips for employees using the names of the toys. She even declared that all the salary slips had been signed before she laid eyes on them. "Wait a minute," I said. "You mean those stuffed animals actually paid the employees? Do you know how illegal that is?" She complained, "I haven't found out who's behind this yet, and now I want to know who did this. Plus, I don't know how many times I've had to throw those damn toys in the trash." Then she kicked the office of the stuffed animals, causing Donald to crash into the wall. She asked the higher-level manager to help her find the thief because no one here respects her. She even asked him to come to her office to start the investigation. But before leaving, he suddenly turned to look at me with concern. Because of me or, he asked, "Did you hear Donald scream?" The manager made sure the break room had been locked for the entire hour, and no one could enter while both of them were talking. But when we opened the door, the office of the three gentlemen had been restored to its original state, except for a few dented cardboard pieces. I'm sure I wasn't the only one who felt they were glaring at the manager every time she passed them. I swear their expressions had changed. Before leaving, I went to see the teddy bears and said, "She doesn't know you're alive. She thinks someone is deliberately driving her crazy. Like a husband intentionally making his wife think she's insane by relying on the ending of Toy Story." By morning, the three gentlemen were nowhere to be found. When we saw them again, the American manager told us what had happened during the emergency meeting. He went through the ledger, asked around, and found that the manager was demanding payment for non-existent employees and had been taken away by someone. Oh, to say, taken away. But in reality, she had been relieved of her duties and admitted to a psychiatric hospital for treatment after being diagnosed with nervous breakdown. Everyone believed that someone had discovered her situation and was trying to harass her, but why didn't they report it to the police? At lunchtime, the three gentlemen returned to their desks. We all thought they might be haunting her like some kind of ghost. Anyway, I was the last one to return to work after asking, "What did you do to her?" "Simple," Panchito said as he turned to me. "We had a talk with her." That concludes the first 4 spooky stories in part 1 of the video about horror things Disneyland doesn't want you to know. How did you feel about this video? Leave your comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and share. Also, remember to check out MG Horror Studios' weekly broadcasting schedule. For now, goodbye, and see you in the upcoming videos.